This is Sparta!
If your first impression in front of your opponent doesn't go that well, you can always make up for it with a last impression. In the case of these entries, I'd say it's a fair trade because today the TV region presents the top 25 finishing moves in the movies.
Get down!
Iron Man wasn't seen as a team player early on in the MCU, but look no further than Iron Man 2 to prove that statement wrong. The final battle involving Tony Stark, War Machine, and Ivan's Whiplash had a few standout moments, but none surpassed the finisher move involving a joint laser blast. Technically, it's still Tony's suit doing the job, but hey, you've got to give credit to Rhodes where it's due. Also, I want to highlight how in sync these two were during the whole fight sequence, not just the one with Ivan. It was almost as if we were watching two bros playing Call of Duty together.
See that? Yeah, nice.
People often say that your fate is in the palm of your hand, but I'm pretty sure they didn't have this scene in mind when they said it. Sing using the Buddhist palm technique to finish off the beast was the highlight of Kung Fu Hustle, and it was one of the most visually appealing scenes of 2004 as well. Everything about it was so extra, and yet it just felt so right. Also, shout out to Singh's super durable pants for withstanding so much force, and all of those flames as well. Yeah, they're definitely on the same level as the Hulk's bottoms. This may not be the OG flick, but it's still a pretty badass takedown. The final battle between Dre and Chen goes exactly like you'd expect it. The good guy struggles in the beginning, only to then awaken some hidden power to win the match with an epic finisher. No hate though, because Dre's final crane kick was classy AF. The swag on display was undeniable, and he totally deserved the W. If only Jaden Smith had stuck to this kind of attitude rather than trying to focus on the economic and political state of the world, maybe he could have actually had a successful film career too. Finisher moves aren't always about humans fighting with their gadgets or fists. You've got to give the monsters a chance too, especially if said monster happens to be the king of his kind. The MonsterVerse Godzilla definitely had his moments to shine in his 2014 debut, which was totally needed because of the super dark lighting. Anyway, the finisher in question is his famed atomic breath, which he uses to deep fry the female Muto to a crisp. Yeah, the way he forced open her mouth to shove it down her throat was freaking brutal. But then again, bro did save the city from a nuclear beast, so we'll let the savagery of it pass. Jackie Chan shows up in one of his most hilarious yet badass roles of all time, Wong Fei Hung, aka the fighter who loves drinking. The final battle against Lo Hoi Kung, played by Ken Lo, was certainly a display, but I can't exactly explain of what. Yes, the premise of using alcohol for Wong here is like using spinach for Popeye. Bro became overpowered to a whole other level, but I can't for the life of me explain what these moves are. They look like a mixture of martial arts, Zumba, and maybe some snake dancing. Point remains though, that Wong totally owned Kang in this fight, especially that epic finisher move where he simply lifts him up and throws him behind as if he's just taking out the trash. Some people like to call it the Iron Palm, and others state that it's the Iron Fist technique, but the point remains that it's a badass finisher move that made Chin-Pei a lethal fighter. Many people say that this was an essential movie when it came to making kung fu films more mainstream in America, and if you look at the moves on display, I wouldn't disagree. That thug had no idea what was coming his way the moment Chin-Pei showed off his glowing hands. Normally, if you see a man with red hands, you should get the heck out of there. But the plot needed the goon to be humiliated, so we got this epic display of the Iron Fist, or Palm, or call it whatever you want. You know, I too am blessed with this technique, although my hands only turn red when I accidentally take my pizza out of the oven without my mitts on. There's something about bold guys that seemingly makes them almost invincible in fights. Just look at the selection we have here. Dwayne Johnson, Vin Diesel, Jason Statham, and here it's Mark Strong as Frank D'Amico in Kick-Ass. This man totally owned Hit Girl in their final battle, as he wasn't even struggling that much despite getting a few good whacks. Meanwhile, Kick-Ass and Red Mist engage in a battle of the nerds, which really doesn't need a lot of explaining because it looks exactly like what a couple of geeks would look like while fighting over a Pokemon card or whatever. The important thing though is that Kick-Ass makes himself of use by saving Hit Girl with a finisher move that anyone would be proud of. Bro launches a freaking rocket straight into D'Amico and it leads to the most beautiful shot of the entire film. Yeah, they definitely put a lot more effort into showing the villain blow up than in anything else during the whole runtime.
Hey, why don't you pick on someone your own size?
This film remains the most profitable martial arts movie of all time, and for good reason. Bruce Lee delivers on the acting as well as the fighting, specifically in his match against O'Hara. Bro was in no mood to be merciful, and rightfully so. What O'Hara did was definitely deserving of a finisher move like that. What makes it so epic is the fact that Lee isn't even trying to beat him at 100% in the actual fight. He's just using some basic moves and still manages to win convincingly. That is, of course, until O'Hara decides to play dirty. Yeah, we totally didn't see that coming from a villain now, did we? Sarcasm aside, the rage in Lee's eyes was quite evident in the way he stomped the life out of his opponent. I kinda make the same face whenever I crush a cockroach too. Maybe I should use this technique to look cooler when I do it next.
Shoot you between the balls!
Yep, Arnie's pretty popular for his one-liners, and 1985's Commando clearly provides one of his best ever deliveries as John Matrix. The final battle against Bennett may have looked a bit odd because on the one hand we have Arnold, who was in peak human form, and then on the other hand Bennett looked like he could compete for the ultimate dad bod. Maybe this is why women say they prefer that physique, but anyway, the main point here is that John manages to land a critical hit by throwing a freaking pipe straight at his opponent, thus finishing him off for good. Yeah, the fight earlier may have been intense for plot purposes, but this final move was as accurate as it could get. And yes, how can anyone forget the whole letting off some steam line from Arnold that's remained relevant even 40 years after the film's release?
Let off some steam, Bennett.
Yeah, this won't be the last you'll see of Jean-Claude Van Damme today, and the moves he displays in this scene serve as great reasoning for it. His character Kurt was supposed to lose this fight to Tong Po because of Eric being supposedly kidnapped, but once we find out that Eric is safe, Kurt can really let loose. And oh boy, he leaves no stone unturned as he fearlessly thrashes Tong Po without any mercy, making him look like a clown in front of everyone, namely Freddie Lee, who's pretty much the key orchestrator here. Some of these moves were way too good to not be seen on repeat, but the best part about the whole thing is when Kurt manages to kick Tong Po out of the ring, but still doesn't take it as a win. This man wants revenge for what was done to Eric as well as Miley, so he wasn't going to let an animal like Tong Po walk away with a mere beating. The blows he struck as his finisher moves would definitely incapacitated the villain from functioning properly again, and I also like that little kick he delivers to Freddie Lee as well, reminding him that he too deserved it. Oh man, this scene just makes me feel so bad about the whole relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. They were so good together for the first couple of prequel films, but after seeing the OG Star Wars trilogy, we all knew we were going to be in for some heartache. After finally giving into the dark side, Anakin duels with Obi-Wan in what I consider to be the heaviest battle of the prequel trilogy. I mean, we were rooting for Anakin up until now, so to see him fight against the man who was there for him right from the start was actually really tragic. It was a long, drawn-out battle, but at no point did the audience ever feel like leaving their seats. And yes,
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
the finisher slice move that Obi-Wan lands from the higher ground was truly epic to watch, but we all felt a strong sense of unease right after, because it meant that we would finally bid farewell to a character who, in Obi-Wan's own words, was supposed to be the chosen one. Instead, he turned into the greatest screen villain of all time, Darth Vader. But hey, if I'd lost Padme, I'd have given in to the dark side too.
Right now.
Oh, please take me back to the good old days in 2010 when everything was so much better and less dramatic. It was also the year when Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was released, a cult classic that gets a lot of things right, especially when we consider the modern world. The final battle between Scott and Gideon was epic, with involvement from Ramona and Knives as well. Side note, if a guy like Scott can get a couple of baddies like Ramona and Knives, then there's hope for all the men of culture in the world. Back to the grand finale though, a combination of comic book and video game graphics certainly enhanced the vibe of this fight, but the takeaway easily remains Scott's finisher kick that ends up disintegrating Gideon. Yeah, imagine landing a strike so deadly that your opponent literally vanishes in front of your eyes. You know, I may not have even included this clip in today's video had it not been for the uber cool graphics. It was a great choice by the director as it made the scene unique. But yeah, that kick is still fresh in my head as if I just watched the movie in the theaters yesterday.
You're the Rocket Man.
Well, how about that? Death by Rocket makes a second appearance today. It might be a bit mean-spirited to show this after having lost Tony Todd, but I'm sure he liked this scene too. Rest in peace, my man. Now, we all may know Nicolas Cage as Hollywood's favourite madman, so it does come as a surprise to see him play a doctor named Stanley Goodspeed. However, he doesn't dial the crazy at all, especially when he's up against Todd's character, Captain Darrow. They don't really fight as such in this scene, but instead, they discuss their love for Elton John. Well, at least Stanley does, because Darrow doesn't have any interest in Elton's discography. That's when Nick Cage activates his rage mode and launches a freaking missile at his opponent. That too after hilariously calling him the Rocket Man. Man, I really wish we got to see Tony Todd play more roles like this because he was killing it as Darrow up until he got himself killed. While it does seem to be a bit extreme, you know, with the whole missile usage, I personally think it's a great gesture from Dr. Stanley to show the world how to get rid of the freaking Candyman. Yes, You can forget entry number 23 because this is the real deal. For the younger fans of this channel, you may have heard of or watched the popular Netflix series Cobra Kai. Well, here are 2 fun facts for you. Number 1, it was originally a YouTube Red show that got picked up after the platform shut down. Number 2, this actually follows after the immensely popular Karate Kid franchise from the 80s. It's got all the same actors and characters too, most notably Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso. They start off with some hostility in the show, and the main reason for that is the epic finisher move that LaRusso pulled off to win the Valley Championship. It's a crane kick that may look like some funny yoga pose, but it completely takes Johnny by surprise and gives LaRusso the decisive point which crowns him as the champion. Just look at Mr. Miyagi's face here. That man couldn't have been any more prouder of his student after seeing such a kick. Not to say that Johnny's the villain here, because he does show support to LaRusso even after losing, but he was definitely taken over by Kreese's toxic leadership style, so he truly needed to experience loss in order to understand he was with the wrong sensei. And yeah, if you watch Cobra Kai, then you'll know that mostly everyone gets a happy ending.
You're all right, LaRusso. Thanks a lot.
Keep the faith, Stranix.
Never thought Steven Seagal would make it to my top 10, you know, but here he is as Casey Ryback against his former superior, William Stranix, played by Tommy Lee Jones, who, in my opinion, has been 50 years old his whole life. I don't remember seeing this guy in anything where he looks a day younger than that, but I'm not here to hate on that old dude, so I'll just focus on how he dies in the most brutal fashion possible. Now, if we consider the premise of this film, it's essentially a case of karma, but the kind where it was incomplete earlier and gets to be fulfilled properly now. Yeah, Ryback and Stranix had their issues earlier, and as fate would have it, they get reunited again in a final battle that gives us a super intense finisher. Yeah, the knife fight was cool and all, but what really impressed me was the way Ryback gouged out Stranix's eyes and then finished him off with a dagger to the head. If that wasn't bad enough, bro smashed his enemy's head right through the system as if to say, yeah, you can go to hell now. Jesus Christ. I knew Steven Seagal was supposed to be a savage, but this was a different level of nonchalance. Moral of the story, don't be a mean boss. This is a nice one, because it's technically got 3 moves, all of which are supposed to be finishers, but are forced to be put in together because of the villain's plot armor stating that he can't be killed. Yeah, he clearly never heard of Jean-Claude Van Damme, who plays Detective Louis Burke in the cult classic Death Warrant. The Sandman is supposed to have this weird kind of legacy where he claims that he can't have his life ended, but Burke makes sure to do that properly, even if it takes him multiple finishers. First up, we have the flying kick that sends him into the boiler room's flames. That in itself is an epic way to come back into the fight, but for some reason, Sandman manages to survive the burns and effectively turns this into Universal Soldier versus Freddy Krueger. Of course, Burke is up to the task as he lands another kick that sends his opponent flying into a valve system. Under any normal condition, this would have been the end, but Sandman comes back for dramatic effect to taunt Blake, but this pretty much happens to be the last straw. The final finisher is quite simple as Burke seemingly pushes his opponent's head into the valve, instantly end him, and the expression he gives right after is befitting of a true champion.
Welcome to hell!
Patrick Swayze may primarily be known for his films like Dirty Dancing, but Roadhouse comes in at a close second, and some of the fight scenes in it are absolutely brutal. James Dalton isn't someone you want to mess with on any given day, but I guess Jimmy Reno was the punk who was feeling the Clint Eastwood level of lucky. Unfortunately for him, Dalton wasn't in a forgiving mood, which is why he unleashed such a harrowing finisher on him. I'm not even trying to be dramatic here. The dude actually rips his opponent's throat off, and if that isn't wild enough for you, then I don't know what is. There's actually an old saying that goes, if your opponent refuses to be humbled, then you must destroy him. And this particular sequence illustrates it to the T. Even Elizabeth was shocked by what she just saw, and the fact that Dalton used Jimmy's dead body as some kind of symbolic gesture when he was calling out to Wesley only made it all the more intense. Yeah, this may not have been the final scene of the movie, but it sure as heck surpassed whatever came after it, because there's no way you're topping a literal throat rip.
the old-fashioned way.
Tony Jaa is never far from the top, and he sure as heck gives us a brilliant finisher move in this grand finale. Bro bent the knee, and it may not have been the way the Mother of Dragons would have liked, but the audience definitely loved it. The final battle from Ong Bak is a dangerous and lengthy one, with Ting facing off against multiple thugs and Saming, who has happened to take some, performance enhancers. His buddy Humle also assists him, but as expected, it's Ting who does most of the heavy lifting. He manages to beat everyone, including Saming, and he does so with an epic knee drop move that not only finishes off his opponent, but also causes the wooden floor to break due to the impact. Technically, this isn't the end of the scene, because Kom Tuan still tries to end Ting. Luckily though, thanks to Humle and a falling Buddha statue's head, Tony Jaa emerges as the lone victor from this rather lengthy encounter. I still gotta give it to the guy for that knee drop move. It really does look like the ultimate finisher, especially if you're caught up in some kind of street fight. The impact from that kind of blow must be overwhelming.
This is Sparta!
When it comes to Dua Lipa, one kiss is all it takes to fall in love with her. When it comes to King Leonidas, he only needs one kick to kick off a whole war against Xerxes. There's no fight scene involved here, as it's more of a tense situation being caused primarily by the presence of the Herald. He's not only supposed to be a messenger, but the way in which he speaks to Leonidas is more than enough to confirm what he thinks of the Spartans and how confident he is in Xerxes.
Madman. You're a madman.
Air and water.
Of course, our boy ain't gonna stand there and take the insult, so he proudly declares "This is Sparta," and kicks the Herald into a pit of nothingness. Yeah, it sure as heck is a finisher move, because I didn't see anyone coming out of that one alive. But honestly, it's Zack Snyder's direction and creative choices that elevate this moment to a much higher point than it should be. I mean, it's at number 6 on my list for crying out loud. That in itself should prove my point. When people think back to this movie, there might be 1 or 2 fight scenes that they'll remember immediately, but this particular moment will also pop up in their heads. That's mainly because it creates such an atmosphere for the audience that they'll find hard to forget. Plus, it's probably got the most iconic line of the entire movie. Well, for a movie series that literally has the word kill in its title, I'd say that it was only obvious for a finisher move to have been displayed in the grand finale. The bride is a character who spends both films only hoping to seek revenge for what the titular Bill, her ex, mercilessly did to her. So yeah, when she finally met him after all the stress, she made sure to treat us all to a thrilling display of the 5-point palm exploding heart technique. It's considered to be the ultimate move that the bride's master had taught her, and keeping it a secret from Bill was a wise decision because he totally didn't expect to be dealt with such an effective finisher. The look on his face admits defeat, but also displays surprise over the fact that Uma Thurman had learned a technique that he'd always wanted to learn himself. The look on the bride's face was one of vindictiveness and satisfaction, and she deserved it for sure. I mean, even Bill didn't hold a grudge against her for it. He actually went out on a high, as the person who finished him off was genuinely smiling at him during his final moments. Yeah, I know her actual name is Beatrix Kiddo, but calling her the bride just makes her whole persona so much more badass.
Plan A taught you the 5-point palm exploding heart technique.
Of course he did.
This might be a movie that you may not recognize, but I urge you to at least watch the final battle between Prince Yi and Xiao Hai if you do get the time. It's a thrilling display of Buddha-style fighting skills and some ferocious kicking by the prince, who's played by the renowned Korean kicker Hwang Jan-lee. I mean, seeing this fight alone will make you realize how lethal his kicks can get. But the focus is on Xiao Hai, who's played by Mang Hui. The finisher move is applied after Bro gets a little extra support from his buddy, but I'd say that's fair considering the amount of fighting he had to do before facing Prince Yi. Plus, there's no way he was going to win unless he managed to hinder his foot movement. Anyway, the spear hand attack that Xiao Hai unleashes right at the end is super brutal and seemingly ends up taking Yi's life. Yeah, it may not look like that in the movie, but from whatever I could find online, that's pretty much what happens. I guess that's why they're called finisher moves, eh? All in all, if you can ignore Yi's excessive laughing, this is a brilliant display of a fighting style that's not talked about as often as it should be. Jet Li's been receiving tons of love recently on the TV region, and I couldn't be happier. In an age filled with CGI and special effects, we often forget the legends of the past, but not me. Fist of Legend is one of many movies that's proven Jet Li's legacy, but this final battle between his character Chen Zhen and Bill Chow's General Fujita is pure entertainment. It's not a short sequence by any stretch of the imagination, but it's engaging enough to keep our eyes glued to it for its entirety. Eventually, Chen does defeat Chow, and he moves on from the fight, but sore losers don't give up until they use every dirty trick they can think of, which is what Chow does as well. He uses a sword to try and gain an advantage, but Chen's up to the task and manages to use his own belt to counter his opponent. And yes, this is where we see the epic sword and belt combo that finishes off Chow for good. Of course, this particular section does rely on special effects, but it still looks a whole lot better than what we see nowadays. It's a bit too intense for my liking, but hey, when an opponent refuses to accept defeat, there's only so much you can do to avoid killing him. The world loves to hate on billionaires, but one of the few elites who does happen to find love in the public eye is none other than Tony Stark. It's probably because he's a lot more than a dude with a massive bank balance, but then again, he does happen to share a lot of the traits that make billionaires succeed in life. One of those traits happens to be sneakiness, which is no shade to anyone at all because it ends up saving half the universe, and I'm not even exaggerating there. Yes, during the epic final battle of Avengers Endgame, Tony Stark realizes there's only one way to stop Thanos, so he activates sneak mode and manages to steal the Infinity Stones from him in a rather efficient manner. I actually don't want to use that word, so I'll go with a sleight of hand, because that's the exact technique Iron Man uses to get the stones and then give Thanos a taste of his own medicine. It may not have been a direct finisher move, but it ended up finishing each and every one of the opposition members, which means that Tony Stark alone managed to defeat Thanos and his entire army. Yep, that's as big of an achievement as anyone can boast. Are we really surprised to see a legend like Bruce Lee at number 1? Not at all, but we do have to admit that this particular sequence hasn't found a lot of love in my recent videos. It's quite surprising too, because the finisher move here is way too phenomenal to be overlooked. Bruce Lee's character Cheng is already an S-tier badass, but this final battle elevates him to levels way beyond anyone else's comprehension. Like, the dude was already dominating the battle with such ease, but when the dagger came out, he somehow managed to make himself look even more superior. That mafia boss clearly had no idea what was coming to him, especially when Cheng pulled off the ultimate Uno reverse by literally kicking his dagger back into him. Like, how does that even happen from a physics perspective? Anyway, it served as a perfect finisher move, not only because of how it looked, but primarily because it was used as a counter more than anything else. Also, I think I need to highlight how it wasn't the dagger that finished him off, but rather Bruce Lee's inescapable fingers. The dude doesn't even need a whole set of fighting gear to get the job done. His fists of fury are sufficient for the job. Yeah, this man was an absolute beast when it came to fighting. Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe to the TV region, and here's another video that I know you're going to enjoy.